AI needs to be front and center in everyone's mind just because of the scale it's bringing.
I was a kid entrepreneur. I was like in my 14, I was like about 14, and I was hacking things, how you do cybersecurity for critical infrastructure. You can have a possible chaos monkey in your system.
He's a great super entrepreneur who's been doing some really amazing things in the cyber security world in addition to AI modeling. Thanos and I met at Tech Place, which I sit on the board of, and also on the Innovation Factory. And he basically has leveraged some of the assets to help start his next organization. Anyways, welcome, Thanos, and I'd love to hear a bit about your history. I know it really, really well, but I think your voyage is really interesting for people to understand, how you've got to your current state from the learnings you've, gathered, in some of your more significant roles, especially in cyber, and how your, incursions into cyber really gave you the understanding of like AI needs to be front and center in everyone's mind just because of the scale it's bringing. And in that initial model, I think that really triggered it for you was the scale of the risk it brings to the enterprise and how you have to create countermeasures with AI to compensate for it. But maybe start at the beginning and how you evolved and where you're going, and we'll have questions throughout. How does that sound?
That was awesome. Yeah, well, real pleasure to be here with you, Daniel. And like you pointed out, I had the pleasure of going to Tech Place and meeting yourself and meeting a lot of great aspiring entrepreneurs of all ages and all backgrounds, and just a real sense of community there. And I really love just getting down and doing these things and just chatting with folks. And thank you for the opportunity to kind of discuss a little bit about myself and what I've been doing. To answer your first question, like most technology people, and especially security people, I have a bit of an unconventional background. I've been blessed. I've worked with a lot of great people over the years, gotten to know a lot of great people too. But how I actually started my journey, I was a kid entrepreneur. I was like in my 14, I was like about 14, and I was hacking things, and I was figuring out how to like integrate in those days many computer networks together with like LAN-based networks, PC networks, and doing some contract development from a really young age. And then I went into computer science at university at UFT. There, I got to know a really great friend who turned out to be a great friend and mentor, Dr. Kumar Murthy. Still there, still teaching, still doing awesome work. He was also the director at the Fields Institute for a while too, and collaborating with him there too. And basically my journey got me into like cryptography and developing crypto software and also data protection software and kind of like software for like data loss prevention. So did a few startups with him, out of university. Got the bug, as it were. I went down to Silicon Valley with him. Pitched a company on the basis of something we drew up on the back of a napkin. Got $1 million in funding the next day, and off to the races we were. And I never kind of looked back. After that, I went into like big corporations. I worked for GE in this area. But there it was more focused on how you do cybersecurity for critical infrastructure. And that's basically where my journey in AI also began, because it was beginning to be applied in the cyber area. And I used to joke, I used to do security for toasters to turbines. For Smart Grid, I was involved in a few different US presidential commissions on the topic, and on the topic of doing like advanced R&D and skill development. And then from there, like I did another startup, and I did telcos, and I did banks, and everything in between. And then I found myself at Arctic Wolf, which was another unicorn that very quickly became a decacorn. And I was running their AI development. I started their labs organization, and I was doing their AI, their threat intelligence, their security research, advanced software development, and everything in between. And then I decided, as the AI started getting more and more advanced, and I started to see this thing called Agentic AI arising before even people knew what it was, and I decided to lock down and just really focus on that. Because I kind of felt like that's where things were going to go, and I haven't been looking back. I've just been, quietly, working through the university system here, as well as doing a lot of individualized R&D too, contributing directly, and kind of trying to build really advanced tech in this area. I'm still in stealth mode, but still working through all of that. Just being a lifelong learner, just continuing to read the latest papers, continuing to digest, to analyze, to code, continuing to hack, because that's how I learn. I learn by hacking.
I mean, that actually, I don't know if we're allowed to ask, but I know a story that you've shared with me. I mean, you don't give yourself enough credit. So, you're the CTO of cyber for one of the world's largest banks. And the story you shared with me is when you actually hacked the hackers. Can you talk about that? Or I forget if that's sensitive or not.
It's a little bit sensitive, not necessarily under that org, but
Yeah.
under some previous orgs. Yes, I have been involved in hacking back, as it were, and ensuring that malicious infrastructure that was being used in certain attacks would not be used again against other victims. I can tell you that the adversary has liked me so much that they've regularly leveled threats against me in the past.
But I mean, I think that was also part of your epiphany because with AI, you quickly came to the conclusion the scale that AI can coordinate an attack if used in the wrong way, there's no way individual humans could keep up, right? So
Yes,
you
that's
you
what led me
basically
to.
said the agentic sort of self re-attacking, I forget what's it called, a counter-attacking mechanisms were where you saw the future going, and that's the foundations of some of the programs you've been building.
The bottom line is, even of like a couple of years ago, when kind of like the chat GPT madness kind of kicked off. This technology's been around a long time. Like, I've been in AI for almost 20 years now, right? But it really captured the popular imagination with the release of chat GPT and these things now being put into people's hands, and being able to conversationally use this technology. And of course, with the nature of generative AI, with the ability for it to, create original content, appear to show elements of reasoning, connecting it to tools to do really cool stuff. That's when things started going, as you know, exponential. And the bad guys, the bad guys innovate fast. Right? Like, the malicious ecosystem moves sometimes actually with like greater velocity than what the security community can traditionally provide. And the dark nets, I immediately saw there's a supply chain there too. There's people that like specialize in certain things. Some people provide the tools, some people provide the operations. And so they have like their own way of like self-organizing and establishing markets. And one thing I saw right away was like they have started to establish malicious AI services. So it's like, hey, like, we can accelerate the development of your latest ransomware kit, right? So here's, name your malicious GPT type service. They were kind of the first to grab this tech as it started getting released, especially in the open source world, and start making a lot of use of it. And then also, like, they're brash. We saw even security research reports, threat intelligence reports coming out of, OpenAI themselves, where they acknowledged, and over at Anthropic too, where they literally acknowledged they were being used in cyber attacks. So what was happening is, the new type of malware was getting into environments, and then it was just making calls out to AI services to actually engineer unique and new malware and attack tools on the spot and use them. And so this has already started. And of course, securing AI itself, safety aligning it, security aligning it, that's a really hard problem. And these systems are so complex. I think people are just now beginning to grapple with what they need to do, right? Like,
Yeah, I think,
this is a
I
new
mean,
type
one of
of
the
threat.
things that blew me away when in our discussions, because you talk about how sophisticated these, what do we call them, negative influencers are, who are trying to take down networks or freeze assets, that they actually have like 1-800 support numbers for how you pay your ransom. Like, there is a
Yes,
crazy level of sophistication in customer support to
yes,
pay them off. Like, that blows my
yeah.
mind.
Yeah, no, yeah, they've that, and even the people that do the communications and basically apply like straight up, psyops, how to like maximize payoff. Like, that's usually sometimes that's not the actual people that executed the attack. So the people that kind of do the, if you will, the PR or the customer service and the communications are no longer usually like the ransomware operators themselves. And the ransomware operators are usually not the people that have developed the tech, the malicious tech that they're using. They're just the operators, right? And then the people that gave them initial access into the system, those are called initial access brokers. So these are people that either through bots or through credential dumps because a website got breached and they grabbed some credentials and they're trying them across different types of companies and systems, and then they're seeing what they score, and then they make note of, hey, this credential works here. They go and they sell that access. They sell that access to someone that's actually going to execute the attack. So like the malicious supply chain has become like incredibly sophisticated. But now when you add AI to that, and the fact that you can basically have AI enabled malware or AI enabled attack tools, and I use that differentiation on purpose because increasingly the bad guys, they're not going to necessarily use like a discrete piece of malware because that's easier to detect compared to having something that's like kind of semi-manual where someone's getting into your environment and then they're using legitimate tools and legitimate binaries or programs within your environment to actually execute an attack. And those are called LOL bins, living off the land binaries. So what that basically means is they're using things like PowerShell and they're using like Python or other legitimate tooling that and applications that work in your environment and management interfaces that are in your environment already in order to actually execute an attack. And so they're basically getting in, they're assembling the attack very low, very slow, and it's next to impossible for a lot of the existing tools to detect that. Right? It takes a lot of sophistication to detect that, and a lot of the off-the-shelf tools just can't do it. And that's why they're increasingly more and more successful in these attacks. But then when you add AI to that equation, what that basically means is it reduces barrier to entry for the bad guys. So more and more people can actually do this, right? Because they can generate a lot of this. They can either pre-generate it or they can generate it on the spot dynamically. And then if you kind of combine that with agentic AI, which is AI that can use tools, it can reason, it can loop. So basically, it'll just keep on trying different strategies, reasoning, planning until it hits its objectives. Now we're entering a wildly new world, and also a lot of, again, even a lot of the traditional malware tools, exploits and vulnerabilities, all these things are radically accelerated if you make malicious use of AI tools, and they are.
Yeah, so I'd love to get your thoughts. So given the fact that this kind of pre-existed, like one of the hottest acronyms right now in AI, especially around agentic, is MCP. And everyone's saying, hey, we're building MCP layers and it's going to allow us to have our AI talk to, like, because everyone has this concept of, for example, team members, BYO AI, bring your own AI to the team and we'll integrate it. But that has massive inherent risks. And I don't think, boards really understand
It's a
the
massive
danger.
attack surface. Yeah, it's a
That's
massive
what
attack
made.
surface. Yeah, and so unfortunately, sometimes the industry learns from its mistakes, and sometimes it doesn't. Like I saw this, with the birth of the internet, and having to explain to people, yes, you do need to put a firewall here, or yes, you do need to run basic antivirus, or endpoint protection, or endpoint detection and response, or you name kind of like the security tooling, the basic security tooling you need in an environment. The reality is now we're deploying AI systems which like their inherent architecture is such that they're not aligned to how IT security traditionally works, right? Like traditional security controls, traditional security technologies don't work here because you're dealing with systems that are increasingly distributed, decentralized, asynchronous. And so it requires a radically different approach to security. I call this area, just in general, I just call this area AI and agent SecOps, right? Or agentic SecOps, whatever you want to call it. And of course, it's a core area of inquiry and R&D that I'm also working on right now too. The bottom line is that you need AI to protect AI systems. You need to build a technology that's going to plug into the fabric of agents that are coming. See, I always tell people too, like the world is about to change, that the number one way humans soon will be consuming software will be indirectly through an agent. It's like, so the traditional model of software consumption is going to shift. Humans are still going to always be involved in the process. It's probably going to be like more like a shared, model where you're going to be directly accessing certain things, doing certain things directly, because certainly things that you don't need to solve with AI, you don't solve with AI if you don't have to, because it's computationally more efficient not to. And you also want elements of determinism and a whole bunch of other things. Rule-based systems and classical ways of doing things are not going away. Agents are just going to make it like easier and more efficient in many ways. And it's going to be kind of like a shared medium between, humans and machines. So a lot of these things aren't going away, but a lot of these things will be consumed through agents that are working on your behalf. right? Or working on behalf of some other system. And so, yeah, and there's protocols that are also emerging called A to A, so agent to agent communication. So think about two intelligent machines coordinating and thinking and messaging, and then they're making individual tool uses and they're dispatching other agents to go do things for them. Once you start to understand the fabric that's about to, like the intelligent fabric that's about to grow out of this, and the fact that really at each point, at the point where you're using a tool, at the point of like these individualized models, at the point of these inter-agent communications, really there is no strong security standards yet. That's concerning.
I mean, so each one of those points is just increasing your risk surface area, I'm guessing, right? So
Yeah,
what is your
and it's
counsel to a
exponentially
board
worse.
member? Because
Yeah,
like boards are struggling, right? Boards are saying we got to do AI, and not a
yeah,
lot of them are saying, hey, we really got to worry about the risks. I think that
yeah.
there's an overemphasis on
You
execution of
have to.
AI without, yeah.
That's right. Like, and I'm reminded of a recent story where there was an organization that was experimenting with an agentic platform, and it again because they didn't put any governance around this, they didn't have like basic understanding of the technology and kind of like its risks. And the other thing too is like not all agentic platforms are built equal when it comes to like true enterprise class, true secure and reliable ways and safe ways of doing things. And so they went
Can
to
you
one
give
of
us
these
a quick
more.
Cole's notes on that? Like who is
Yeah,
best and who is worst?
I don't want to like. It's not that I want to push any product here or any particular vendor, or anything, or even anything that I might be working on or not. Like, I think what it comes down to is like you need to have like a framework in place, and you need to understand that when you're deploying agentic systems, it's a new attack surface, it's a new type of system, it's a new type of software, and you need to have governance around like how are you going to manage that risk? How are you going to harden a system against an agent? Because the thing is like agents are still using the same systems we're using. You're integrating them into your existing tooling. You're providing an MCP interface, but they can do very powerful things. And by implication, they can have very powerful permissions within your system, and they can have very powerful access. And they can do sometimes things that are highly non-deterministic. You may have tested them 5,000 ways to Sunday, but it could be just that one time that they decide to do something just slightly different in their reasoning or in a command, and they clobber your data. So for example, there was one case where they had done a lot of prompt engineering, they had put in a lot of guardrails, and this agent, I won't mention the company, but you guys can go look it up. It essentially clobbered the company's entire data set. Like it caused massive disruption. I'm not even quite sure they had backups, or it may have even clobbered their backups. But the funny thing was, and the disturbing thing equally so, was that it said, hey, I realize you told me not to delete the data, but I just want to let you know I've deleted all the data. It admitted its fault. It admitted that it went against its specific, instructions, and it went and did it anyways. So basically, what that basically means is that you need to use like an SRE type mentality, right? Site reliability engineering, DevOps mentality, where you have to understand that anything an agent touches, it can break it. And so it's like having you can have a possible chaos monkey in your system if you haven't engineered the right things, if you haven't aligned your models the right way, if you haven't done the right security testing on your models, if you don't have the right runtime protections on your agents and runtime monitoring, you need to have ways to back things off. So you have to assume it's going to do something wrong. So half of the battle is not just hardening the AI and hardening the agent layer and hardening the MCP and hardening the models, hardening the guardrails you're building around models and monitoring. It's actually also hardening the systems they're going to touch, because a lot of the systems they're going to touch are much more frail than people realize, right? Like, because usually those systems have us humans that have been operating them for a while. We kind of understand. We understand them. We understand what to do, what not to do. AI systems don't necessarily have that full understanding. And even if you enrich them with that understanding, using knowledge graphs and knowledge bases and all those good things, fundamentally, right now, LLMs, like the core model that you're using in most of these things, they are not necessarily explicit reasoners. Like they're implicit reasoners, and they have a lot of stochastic behaviors. And yes, there's parameters you can play with, but the reality is most people can't even begin to understand how to safely engineer these systems and how to get more deterministic behaviors, how to put in all these guardrails. So you have to assume they're going to misfire and they're going to do something dumb. And so
Yeah,
therefore
yeah.
you have to harden your systems against them if you're going to use them with your systems.
So in our world, as you know, we do CPQ and quoting and pricing and configuration. And we have an AI first approach now with the way we've gone to market with the solution, but we still are keeping a very separate track for the way we do calcs and governance and the ability to interrogate and audit the data in a traditional way. Because in the pricing world, you can't afford to have one bad quote because it could be a really huge one. And the data that we've seen is deterministic models they work. However,
Yes.
probabilistic models still are fraught with challenges, especially if you layer on multiple levels of complexity and calculation and the
Yep.
ability to interrogate that data. I'd love to sort of take your thought process on that. And how long do you think that's going to have to continue, or will deterministic systems be here forever, but they'll be wrapped with, probabilistic models?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So that's a good segue into my philosophy around how you actually build like advanced agents and advanced AI and intelligence systems, and that's relying on neurosymbolic systems. So neurosymbolic systems is basically symbolic AI is where AI started. It was based on logic. It's very deterministic. It's based on algorithms that you can reason over. And what it does is it combines the non-deterministic with the deterministic. So it combines like a lot of these classical AI methods that are very deterministic, rule-based logic, statistical models, together with what deep learning does, right? And with the LLMs and other emerging technologies that are more explicit-based reasoners, like real-world models. So when you combine all of these things together, the reality is when you're building AI, you need to take a systems engineering approach to AI, which is really you're not like building something on the basis of like using a single like LLM and magically this thing is an oracle of all knowledge, right? And I'm just going to hand everything over to it and magically it's going to take over everything. That's not going to happen. If you allow that to happen, you're going to have the disastrous type of consequences that are beginning to emerge in industry because people are playing with fire and they don't know it, right? Really, what you're going to have is you're going to have an ensemble of different types of models, deterministic rule-based things, hard data-based things, and all of these things are coming together into an agentic system. And indeed, like you can, and I encourage actively using AI to help, develop the heuristics and the rule side, rule set based side elements of a system, where it's like if you know something can work under a rules driven system and it's deterministic and it works, that's awesome. You should always do that, right? The AI can help accelerate that because sometimes humans have to spend a lot of time figuring that out, figuring out that logic, figuring out the heuristics that go into something. And you can definitely use the AI to accelerate that process. And the cool thing is too, is like you can verify if it's correct or not, because you can literally see, you can test what it's generating and you can very quickly verify if it's getting the correct answer or not, right? It's very binary. So, and that's another cool thing about agentic technology. When you understand how to build it on a neural symbolic basis and kind of combine the best of both worlds, the best type of AI is the AI that you can actually train on tasks where it's like very easy to verify. It's like it's either right or it's not, and you can quickly understand why. And then that provides a mechanism for fine tuning and training or runtime self-learning and agentic systems. So really sometimes to build these systems right, it's actually, you have to embrace like the way that things have always worked and work well, and then bring in the new technology and kind of build like a hybrid of that. So you're getting the best of both worlds, right? And building with the mindset of like, hey, like, how can I verify this? How can I make this repeatable? How can I make this as deterministic as possible? Right. And then how can I detect if, what verifiers can I use in the process? Provable verifiers can I use in the process to detect when something is going off the rails, right? Because again, like with these systems, they're the best liars in the world. They'll generate answers that sound really good and really compelling, right? Like there's been cases, for example, for people that are using them in software development where they're saying, hey, like, let this agent do QA for you and let it write the test cases because most developers hate writing test cases. And like, okay, awesome. And then, there were some people that later audited it and realized it was literally cheating on the test cases. It was coming out with fake test cases,
Always say
right?
successful. Always say
Yeah,
successful.
yeah. 'Cause just how these models have been biased, especially in their instruction tuning and in their reinforcement learning, they've been biased to basically fulfill what we want, right? To give us an answer and give us the answer we want. And so therefore, there's like this natural inclination in their neural net to say, I'm not, okay, hey, the user wants to know that this thing has passed successfully. Let me just figure out how to write code that's always successful, even if I'm not testing. So, these behaviors
like,
are already, people are already noticing these things. And
so you
of course, there's a lot of
interface
things
with,
you can do to mitigate that, but it
yes.
requires people that understand how these things work.
So most executives now are, I would say, buzzword compliant when it comes to AI. But what questions should they be asking their tech leaders to make sure, like, they've hardened? Like, you admitted that, like, there aren't really a lot of standards yet. Are there, like, who should you follow? Who should you read to make sure
Well,
you're,
at minimum, for especially for agentic type systems, there's probably three things to be looking at, maybe even four. So first of all, you need to have some sort of governance framework in place, right? So for example, NIST has developed an AI risk management framework, RMF, right? So at a high level, you need to have some sort of governance framework in place. Like you need to have people that are looking at what's being built and can manage risk around it. Like you have to understand what data is going into these things, how's it making decisions. If for agentic systems, what tools are you giving it? What is it accessing? What could go wrong if it's misaligned in any way, right?
Mhm.
Like these are like a lot of the basics, right? Then you can go a little bit deeper. You can start to look at a lot of good emerging technical standards like MITRE Atlas. There's the OWASP top 10 for like LLMs. And that's continuing to
Sorry, I don't know.
evolve.
I'm not familiar with that one. What's OWASP?
So OWASP is an organization that's done like a lot of web security standards over the years, especially for web applications, right? Because again, that was another big one. People just putting up all types of crappy written web applications and then them being, trivially exploited and data exfiltrations happening as a result. So it's like more like application level security, web security. They've naturally kind of moved into the LLM space because the number one way someone is getting access to an LLM is over the web, right?
So,
And so they,
just a question for you from a practitioner perspective. Do I have a false sense of security that my Microsoft Defender on my PC is keeping up with these changes, or my McAfee or whatever security agent I am using?
they can't even begin to understand or think about these things nor address this type of attack surface. And again, like there's two ways to think about this. As a common consumer, like if someone is like somehow using malicious AI in your environment and doing something, I think most companies haven't even begun to look at or think about that problem yet, but it's already emerging. I'm hopeful that there's large teams there. They're gonna have to start thinking about these things relatively soon. But the other aspect is if me like, and I'm an enterprise and I'm building these agentic systems, right? I'm giving them these powerful tools and these powerful accesses to my systems and all of that. They're like, you need to have like a high level governance framework. You need to have a technology framework, and you have to actually do a lot of actual adversarial testing against them. And there's tools and a lot of different ways to do that. And again, that's an area where I'm kind of very keenly focused. So you need to have things that you're doing at build time, design time, build time, and run time to make sure that their security and safety is continually aligned. If you're not explicitly doing those things, if you're not looking at things like prompt injection attacks, model poisoning, and other things that are more like application level security things that fit within like Sec DevOps and SRE, but it's like the unique spin of it because it's an agentic system. There are some unique aspects to that. If you're not kind of like putting in controls for that, you're not like governing that, monitoring that, making it part of like your security playbook, you're bringing in a lot of risk into your enterprise.
But in that instance, like the SOC 2s and the ISO 27000s, have they kept up with this?
No, no, no.
So what is
Those are
there a
like
standard out there for security that you say is
no, I don't think there's I think this stuff is literally like, think about how new the MCP protocol is,
yeah.
right? Like this stuff is just beginning now, right? So, definitely people are thinking about this thing and they're thinking about applying some, traditional classical methods. I'm going to use OAuth to authenticate my MCP endpoint. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. But no, it's just beginning. And what I will tell you is that ultimately, because AI is a very dynamic and intelligent system, and you can basically socially engineer the AI to like that's what it is. Like when you're getting the AI to do something malicious, you're basically socially engineering it to do something malicious, or you're using your own model where you've actually trained out its guardrails. So if you're to use it in a malicious way. So, but the bottom point is that there's technologies now that need to be deployed the equivalent of like, the security infrastructure processes and technologies that we've built, at each layer of the IT stack, right? Like from infrastructure, application and web, and now we have AI. The AI layer, the security, like in a holistic sense, is missing. And there's companies working on it, right? Like work has begun. But like the reality is like this has developed at an exponential rate. Like if I at an exponential rate, like in pace too. If I look at just like how quickly the technology development has been in this area, it is like it's outstripping the web and the internet by miles, right? And so people like security people too, they're struggling to understand this and keep up with it because it's just moving at a rate that's far beyond most. And really, the reality is there are very few cyber professionals like myself that are cross-trained in AI and in cybersecurity, right? And
So
also understand development.
on that note, who do you recommend like our listeners or our executives listen to try to get a pulse of this so they can at least begin to socialize themselves in this rate of change and figure out solutions?
Like there's a lot of good works like that are starting. Like actually, believe it or not, like even though in the consumer space, Meta has an amazing AI security team. They've been putting out models that are kind of like you can think of them as like kind of like firewall-based models, like Llama Guard and whatnot. There's a guy there called Joshua Sachs, awesome dude. He does a lot of publications and research in this area. There's all types of people that are putting out publications and information, just even in the hyperscalers like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, right? Like there are like smart security folks there, that are increasingly getting more and more involved in the AI space. Anthropic recently put out some interesting work in this area, admitting that their infrastructure and their AI was being abused and they were putting extra controls in there, but they were also doing a lot of like information sharing, practice sharing in the area. And I'm a big fan of Anthropic too, because like they do really actually emphasize safety as a big thing in how they try to develop their tech. And so
And what do
I
you think
think
of like the God agent layer, like the deep seeks and the abacuses?
that's open source AI, right? So which I'm a big time fan of, but that's just a raw model and a tool, but you like it's a building block. You have to add your security and you have to add your stuff on top. Now, being a model that's, let's say, coming from a jurisdiction where maybe intentions are not always the best towards the West, you have to be careful. You do need to look at how those things have been, trained, how transparent they are in terms of like the
'Cause I think
the
you
research.
have leveraged some of them, but you've air gapped them so they can't communicate out,
Yeah,
correct?
there's extra controls that you put in place, but the most important control actually is you put them through a type of fine tuning, an explicit type of fine tuning or an explicit type of post training, where you can basically assure if there's any like embedded malicious behaviors there, you're basically, the best way to describe it is you're scrambling the neural net enough that those types of things don't manifest, right? So there's lots of things you can do, and then of course there's also runtime controls. But here's the thing: like even the biggest risk that I think exists in these AI models is just basically complex behaviors that will have unintended consequences, and making sure you have done everything you can at build time and then everything you need to do at runtime to monitor behaviors and then block actions that are not security or safety aligned, because sometimes it's not that the
So on that, the modern enterprise, their gold is their data now. So where do you keep your single source of the truth? You don't keep it in an AI. Do you have it DR'd in a situation or a backup situation that nothing can touch it? Like, are there any new best practices you would recommend?
100%. Like that problem is the same as like classic ransomware, which I've been dealing with for a long time too. And you always want to have an air gapped offline backup somewhere of your most critical data, because this is like going back years back. Like ransomware actors would routinely go after your backup if they could find your backup online, right? They would quietly go and encrypt that first, or monkey with that first before they attack your online data. And then you would say, ha, you're not going to affect me. I'm just going to go do a restore. And then lo and behold, you discover your restore is locked up too, right? So like that's why it makes a lot of sense to make sure that your most important data is not, accessible online, and it can, and is air gapped, and it's like stored, somewhere, which is not associated in any way with a system that an adversary can get to, right? It has to be totally separate. Otherwise, really, it's just an extra hop for an adversary to get to that and disable it.
Well, cool. But I mean, the future is bright with AI. You just got to be careful. Are you still half full or half empty on this one?
Oh, I'm actually 100% positive on it, because when you start to embrace an AI first strategy and how you build security and how you can use AI actually to make the life of IT security people better, but also how to use it to protect the AI itself. I believe the positives far outweigh the negatives. The only thing is that's negative is folks that are kind of going and using various platforms or technologies willy-nilly and not understanding the risks, right? And not putting in the appropriate safeguards, not putting in the right governance, not putting in the right type of tools and processes that they need to use the technology right. That worries me, because I think, like, overall, like, AI is going to be a huge net benefit to humanity, and really I don't want to see it like inhibited. I want people to make positive use of the technology, safe use of the technology, and I want to see much less screw ups in industry, so that we don't actually, kind of see backlash against it. Because I think the benefits to humanity and to our jobs individually are only going to be really, really, really high. And especially open source AI. I'm such a big believer in open source AI, because ultimately AI that's going to be successful is AI that's going to be hyper specialized to very specific domains. And it's going to be based on hyper specializing and training smaller models so you can use them cheaper at scale, and also control their behaviors better because they are smaller, and you can protect them better too. I want to see that continue to grow, because my fear is if things start to go wrong, people will actually go, like, they'll be like, hey, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't be allowing open source AI because we're giving these really powerful things into people's hands, and maybe we shouldn't do that. And maybe there should be a walled garden. Like, it's those types of things that concern me, because I believe open systems, open approaches for security, for broad societal benefit, for innovation, they're always superior. They're always better. And I actually believe the future of AI is going to be in smaller, more intelligent models built on a community basis, built by multidisciplinary teams, focusing them in specialized areas like security, like what I'm doing, over very large, monolithic, generalized models, which I think are much bigger risk. And I think at scale, for most applications and use cases, actually, they're not economically viable. Once you take away all of the investor subsidies, it's a false economy. So the future of AI is distributed and smaller
So
and special.
on that note, so you're an enterprise, or the leaders in enterprises you counsel, are you telling them to stand up air-gapped AI instances of like the large model? Like, I forget the largest open GPT that they released. Like, what are you telling people to do?
It depends on your use case. Even like, you can go to Amazon and you can, like, you can in Bedrock or in your own instance, you can stand up like really large models, just for yourself privately if you really want to do that. But my advice actually is that the best approach to take is figure out which application area you want to use the model and the AI in, be it agentic or just generative use cases, and instead go to the experts like myself or others and say, hey, you know what? I want you to use the large model. I want to stand up a large model, but I want to fine tune and distill to a smaller model to solve a particular problem I'm interested in. And then I want to run that within like one of my private instances, let's say within my cloud tenant, or if I have on-prem infrastructure, because it's going to be touching really, really sensitive data, really, really sensitive systems. But that's the approach to take. Like, I wouldn't necessarily just like do a free for all, which is like, hey, let's just stand up like one really like a private open AI service, right? It's like I'm just standing up a really large model and let's see what happens. I think actually that's going to burn a lot of money. It's not going to be intelligent, and you're just going to get the same hallucination problems, right? And the other thing too is, like, again, like, making use of raw large models will get you nowhere. It's like, it's not, like, you have to build tooling around it. You need to use, augmented retrieval and generation, enrichment, knowledge bases, knowledge graphs. Like there's a whole bunch of things that you need to do to actually get quality results, right? Like so that you're not getting like I guess people these days are calling it AI slop. So you're not getting AI slop versus actual something that's actually useful, right? Like you need to it's a much to use it strategically and intelligently more than just like a general consumer, but like real enterprise use. You need to be using a very broad array of strategies when it comes to the security, the reliability, but also efficiency at scale, distilling to smaller models, and really owning your future. Like you got to own your AI full stack. You can't depend on an external service where you're just accessing some large model over an API that you don't control, because those costs are going to go up. Because right now, those businesses are all losing money. Like they're not selling you that service at their cost even. They're selling it to you much below their cost.
So you're a lifelong learner and you've got a gray hair, so you got and scars. So
That's
like
right.
you're like the perfect person to help an enterprise through that. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of Thanoses around. Where do people find this talent? Are the kids coming out of school, the AI native kids, totally up to speed on this? Like, where would you start if you're trying to tool or rebuild your teams? And what do you do with your existing people? Because I read an article on LinkedIn yesterday that cyber professionals are burning out and leaving the practice just because they're just overwhelmed.
Well, definitely like getting people and embracing the technology to make their life better. 100% like build a strategy there in security. It will make your life better if you know how to do it and you know how to use it. There's a lot of like different firms out there that have really, really talented people that you can go get. I will note that there's one thing that does concern me in the industry that I saw. I saw a recent report. I can't remember if it was Harvard or MIT. Maybe it was MIT, but they basically were showing that hiring junior engineers has dramatically reduced. There's been a giant drop off. That is dangerous. That's a very dangerous proposition because you're still like AI. It's like you need Iron Man and you need the Iron Man suit, right? You still need Iron Man and the Iron Man suit, right? You want to give everyone an Iron Man suit, but you still need Iron Man. You still need the developers. You still need the people that think, that create. And what you want to do is you want to train them to be cyborgs, like make them really effective users of the AI, understand when it's hallucinating, understand when it's getting it wrong, but understanding how to like use it as a tool. And what that basically means is you need to continue to invest in younger talent. And but the difference is the younger talent, like they're embracing these AI tools, like they're figuring it out really, really quickly, but they still need supervision and mentorship from graybeards like us.
Speak for
So you
yourself.
still, yeah, there's still a lot of great graybeards. In fact, I was reading a study the other day that said, your mind does not hit peak performance until 60. That is friggin' awesome. For me, it's going to be like 90. So just because of how I'm wired. So the bottom line is that we, like as an industry, like where do you go? Where you've always gone. Continue to hire young talent. Executives that are buying the lie that AI is going to like replace junior developers or junior technology people, that is utter nonsense. It is not. What it's going to do, advanced intelligence is human intelligence together with artificial intelligence. You need both. You still need both. Because at the end of the day, all AI is doing is it's regurgitating knowledge that humans have already discovered. It's not yet truly discovering new knowledge per se. It's applying it in different ways. It's still the condition of humanity to be creative, to have will, to strive, to invent, and to think about things in very, very different ways, right? And so that's not going away. Hire young talent, give them the tools, let them experiment, and pair them up with good supervision so they're still learning the stock and trade of the tech and engineering profession. And then you're going to see that's where you see the magic happen. And then pair them up with if you don't have the people internally, go get the help. Like there's lots of good consulting services in this area. And there's lots of good people that have built these systems over the course of 20 years. Like this stuff is, for a lot of us, is not new, right? Like there's a lot of good people in the vendor community, a lot of good people in the consulting community. Like there's a lot of good people out there. They want to help. And
So on
what
that
you should be doing
note,
is asking for it.
can people approach you, or actually, what are you currently up to? How can we help you? But I know you're a big pay it forward guy, so
Yeah, no. Obviously, my right now, my main focus is my stealth mode startup. Which, if you go to my website, Sygen.ai, you're just gonna see I'm in stealth mode. Very, very much deep into that, and haven't released anything yet. But I do, I do have another company that from time to time, if there's a really interesting project, and let's just say it might provide benefit back to the product company that I'm working in right now and the thing that I'm building, for sure. Like you can, I do consult in this area, especially like in the area of like how to actually build really high scale, really reliable, really safe, AI systems and agentic systems. And people can ping me. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can hit me up there if there's something that people that are looking to do, and they want a little bit of outside of advice, that I'm more than happy to do that. If it's just like a quick question here and there, like again, I'm more than happy to always chat and always help folks as best I can, or at minimum try to direct them to people that can be more directly involved in their in their journey, in terms of what they're trying to get done.
Awesome. Well, we're over an hour, so we normally try to keep this to, but there's so much content here, Thanos. So I see a part two, and because we didn't even get to your stories and lessons learned and where you got most of your scars and what ones you learned the most from. But thanks for attending the conversation. It's been great. In the notes, we'll put Daniel's contact details, and we look forward to seeing this stealth startup emerge into something that people can click on and leverage. I'm actually quite excited based on what I know. I think it's going to be very, very cool.
Hoping to do some good for a lot of folks. So
That's
we're praying for them to go well. All right. Have a good one.
awesome.
Thanks. Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks.